We had started with this building. This is before tongue and groove was available here in the country. So our first building is just the wood slats, put one together, and then we have the outside wood strips to cover the little gap where it might show light or have wind passing through. But we were able to build this one dorm. Now everything had to come across the river at that time. We didn't have any road access. No one would let us even drive through or have access to our land. We'd purchased land that had no running water, no electricity, and no road. We had in our camp, we were hoping to have 150 people come for a worship conference the first few days of June. And it ended up, we had 280 some odd that came. We had people sleeping in the kitchen area. Literally in the kitchen area back here. We had people in this prayer room. We had people in our storeroom. We had people in the attic. Every place was taken. But it was a great time with that and the 50 some odd volunteers that we had at that same time. And our work staff, we were at 380 at the camp. It was a great time. Now, I met right here. This piece of property actually had a mound that came up just kind of a sharp point, and I stood up about 10 feet higher, but at this same place right here. And as I looked at the property, I knew that this is what God had blessed us with. That God was going to give us this property. Yeah. And it was a great challenge. First of all, I was looking, I thought, okay, this land that he's showing me doesn't have road access, we don't have access to electricity, and there is no water. But I knew this is what God wanted us to purchase, and he gave us that confidence to say, go ahead and buy the land. So I negotiated the purchase of this property right here. With the landowner, we walked out to the same irrigation ditch, and I got in the car and told Carol, I said, Carol, do you realize I just told this man I'll meet him on Wednesday and pay in cash? And I thought, I don't have any money. I didn't have a mission board. I had nobody to pick up the phone and call and say, loan us some money. I had told Carol, I said, this is just going to be a test of our faith because I know that this is what God wanted us to do. And so we've responded. The following day on a Friday, I got a call from Global Outreach. Now, Global Outreach is an institution out of Tupelo, Mississippi. We had contacted them, and we were under consideration, watch care. But we had not been appointed to be global missionaries. And I got a call from the executive director, Sammy Simpson, and Sammy said, Brother Steve, are you thinking about building a camp in Ecuador? I said, well, actually, we are. Why do you ask? And he said, well, we received a check at the office today, and it just says Camps Ecuador. And since you're brand new in Ecuador and we didn't know what your ministry areas were going to be, are you thinking about a camp? And I said, well, that's wonderful. How much was the check? I said, $15,000. And the day before, Carol and I had negotiated property here for $14,500. And we had enough money to register the property in our name. God's a very wonderful God of completion, and so he gave us the property. But we still ended up having a piece of land with no water, no road, no electricity. After we reviewed the property, we understood before we purchased that we were buying land that used to be the site of a community called Chacauco, hence the name for our camp, Chacauco. Chacauco means beneath the bridge. And so this community actually, the hillside was a gradual slope, came down to a small valley here, and the community was built in that little valley. Another mound, and then dropped off to where the river was. And the river was over here where the road came in. In 1949, that mountain right over there, you can see the rough edge, broke in half and fell over and covered the community of Chacauco. Everyone died in a flash. The water on the river was dammed up because the land completely filled in. The lagoon that formed way back up the valley, and then it broke through the soft dirt and formed this new valley where the Papete River runs now. So that meant that the water supply for the community of Chacauco now was on the other side of the river. And if you look across the river, there's sort of a rock formation that looks like a natural rock bridge or something, a little half moon over there. Just above that and to the left is where our natural spring comes out of the water, and we're able to capture that water there and bring it down. At that time, we did not have a bridge. The only thing we had to come across the river on was a basket. But now that we have the bridge, the water line comes underneath the bridge, comes up the mountain, and dumps into our reservoir by natural gravity flow. So God provided water for us. It was given to us by the mere thing of in our deed it said we owned water rights. We applied for those rights to be transferred back into our name and brought the water across. The new electrical lines were being run from the hydroelectric plant to Ambato. And an engineer came and talked to me and said, Brother Steve, if you want to tie on now, I'm sure that we can get you approval before all these high power lines are connected. So we hooked onto the lines, and now we have a 3-phase transformer over here on the top of the post in that corner. God gave us enough electricity for an entire city. And then came the issue of the road. Our chicken farmer saw our plight and started allowing us to bring trucks through 2 different times a year. We had 1 week in the fall and 1 week in the spring to bring supplies through as quickly as possible. And during one of those times, as we were running through his chicken farm with big trucks, I stood with Ivan at the top of the property where that highest cabin is, over there behind the main cabins where you're staying. And as we stood at that position, I told him, I said, now Ivan, God wants us to have a road. And I have been assured by the Lord that He's going to give us access to our property. But none of the neighbors, including you, no one will sell us property so he can cut through a road. And you know, once God decides, who is man to stand against Him? And as we visited, then I told him, I said, but the problem is, Ivan, I don't know whether God's going to cut the road through the middle of my neighbor's farm or through the middle of your farm. But He's going to give us a road. That was on a Friday. And Carol and I were still living in Ambato, so we were traveling back and forth, back out to the camp, and I got up early Saturday morning and decided I'd come back out here. And there was really nothing here to see. I just wanted to come out as we were continuing to run supplies through. And when I got here, I found Ivan standing on the top of the property again over here on our side with his arms folded, just watching some tractors move dirt. And so I walked into the irrigation ditch, walked up to the top of the hill and stood by him with my arms crossed as well. And as we stood and kind of watched in silence for a few minutes, I finally said, well, Ivan, what are your tractors doing? And, well, honestly, I couldn't sleep well last night thinking about God cutting a road through my property. And so I've got my tractors cutting a road for you. And he followed his side of the irrigation ditch. And with his tractors, God cut us a road. So we were given water, we were given electricity, and we were given a road. When God's in things, God takes care of the details. We just need to learn how to be obedient. But anyway, this is what God's given us, and this is the way He's used His church to build the property, and now we're using it. It brings me great joy that you're here right when we're having a youth camp while it's being used. So you can see this is what happens every week, and now it's happening almost all year round. So far this year, I'm estimating we've had about 10,000 people on campus this year. That was our goal for 10 years down the road. So God has well gone beyond our expectations.